Welcome to a new video. Today I'm going to share with you my Unchained deck profile as requested. This has been requested very much so, and I finally have a list for you guys to share with. And this deck is, I understand why people really like it, because it's a very flexible deck and you can do a lot of things with it. But before I'm actually going to jump into the list itself, I'm going to say two things. The first thing is I want to thank you once again for additional 100 people additional to the channel, so we reached 2600, as you probably can guess. Now I know specifically it doesn't really shows right now in accounts down there probably, because my count for subscribers that it's changed down there is kind of weird, but without that, regardless, we still reached 2600, and I want to say very much for you. Thank you. And then the other thing is the usual thing: if you want to help the channel, see more videos like this, and also leave your thoughts, I would really much appreciate it if you can give a like, leave your thought in the comments, and essentially also subscribe to the channel. You know, usual YouTuber stuff. But without further ado, let's jump right into the list itself for the Unchained. Alright, so for the list itself, there is one last thing that I actually like to add, and that is to say that this deck has a lot of flex spots. Basically, almost half of the deck is capable for you to change hand traps and stuff like that, depending on what you want specifically. So if there is some particular card choices that I go with, and you guys don't like these tech options, you can definitely change them out for whatever you want to, because this deck is very adaptable for particular strategies because of its so much flexibility, and that's why it's such a good rogue option. But now with that out of the way, we can actually talk about the cards themselves. And we're going to start things off with the twins, even though there are three of them, which is three of each and every single one of them, which is Aruha, Raika, and then three copies of Sarama, which I'm hoping I'm not butchering the names. But basically, these are the core cards on the deck, and very important to see. So all of these twins share the following effect. I don't know why I said search, but share the following effect, that basically if they get destroyed by a card effect except their own, they get to special summon another Unchained monster except themselves directly from the deck. So let's say Sarama is get destroyed by Raika's effect, because that's how that works. You cannot destroy Sarama by his own effect, otherwise it will not work. So let's say Raika destroys Sarama, you can use Sarama's effect to summon Aruha out of your deck if you want to. So that's kind of how actually that works. But actually for their individual effect, the best one is Aruha. Aruha giving you the ability to target a card on the field that you control, basically. Then you lock yourself into Fiend for the rest of the turn. You pop that card, and then you get to special summon him out of your hand, which allowing you a very easy procs for your traps slash your monsters slash your spell, even though your spell you most of the time don't really want to do that, but we'll get to that when we'll get to that. The point is, Aruha is the best one. Raika is kind of like not exactly the same. She definitely locks you into Fiends, but her effect is different. When she's on the field, she allowing you as a quick effect to target a card you control and destroy it. And then she locks you into Fiends. So this is kind of like your quick pop effect. If you need to, you have it on the field, it sit there, and you need some particular effect to proc, she will be able to do that for you. So let's say you have a specific monster you want to pop, you can do that, and then you summon one of your big Unchained souls, which we'll get to them, which actually works really well, which is, this why is actually pretty good to have. And then in the case of Sarama allowing you to target any Unchained card in the graveyard except himself, set it to your side of the field, and then you get to destroy one card you control, which is basically really good for recovery. So this card becomes really good for later turns. It's definitely still good game one, or should I say turn one, because you can just like go turn one with this, pop a card, then summon this out of the deck, then it's revive that card, pop this, and then you go into your Link to Rage, which we'll get to that one as well. But for the point is, Sarama is more of like the card for the grind game. If you draw multiple copies of this in the grind game, it doesn't really matter. This card is great for the grind game. It doesn't have the ability to recycle itself though, but it is what it is. And you want to run three of every one of these because you want to see them. They're good for the grind game, they're good just in general to open up with, and you want to see them as much as possible. At least one, sometimes even two. But that does for those, and now for the souls which I mentioned before, we have Abominable Unchained Soul twice, and then one copy of Unchained Soul Disaster, so two of this and one of this. Honestly, you can definitely get away with maybe even playing second copy of this, or a third copy of this, or even you could play 3-2. I definitely think like you don't really want to maximize on these that much, because they are kind of a little bit of bricks, because they're level 8. Abominable Unchained Soul are definitely less though, because it can special summon itself from the hand if a card you control is destroyed, but you can only special summon him once per turn. And then if he is summoned, or special summoned I would say, he's able to target for you a card on the field after you discard a card out of your hand and then destroy it. So basically, let's say you destroy your own cards with the effect of Arua, he's in your hand, you get to special summon it, you cannot special summon it for the rest of the turn because that's how that works, you can only special summon him once per turn, and then if you have another card in your hand and you need to pop a card for your opponent, you discard it and you pop the card, which is kind of good. And then lastly, his last effect says that if he got destroyed, which is actually kind of good sometimes, and you sometimes need to do that, he's able to revive himself during the end phase to your side of the field, and then if he leaves the field, he's able to put himself on the bottom of the deck, which is actually really good because you do need sometimes to recycle your Unchained Souls. So having the Unchained Soul that kind of like recycle itself is actually pretty good. In case of Disaster, he's definitely the worst one on the two, but still very important and very nice to break boards, because this one have 3 effects. The first one doesn't really matter, he become 300 attack more bigger for each Unchained card in the graveyard, doesn't really matter for that much, but it's still a nice little boost if you're able to summon it on the deck. Sometimes you are getting into games that he become like 4,000 or close to that, so that's actually kind of cool. But mostly what he does is that his effect is basically allowing you to target an opponent monster, and then use him and that opponent monster immediately for a Dark Link monster to summon out of your extra deck, which is actually really good because you're able to just remove some threats if you negate the effects or whatever, and you know, baited them, and then you just like be able to chip your opponent deck, or should I say opponent board little by little. So that's kind of what it does. And then when he dies, you basically become a monster reborn for any basically Unchained monster, which is actually kind of cool. But that does for these guys, and does it for the Unchained monsters. You don't really run a whole lot of them, except from Twins. The Twins are the ones that you run, and honestly, there is not additional Unchained monster, unfortunately. But for now, we do have Hand Traps, which actually got mixed for me, which I run 3D Shifter, and 3 Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. These are the hand traps that I run specifically in case of monster hand traps. I definitely also run another one, which we'll get to that, but these are the most important and most impactful ones to run right now in the format. In the case of Ash Blossom, it should be a given. Ash Blossom is just really good as a card. I don't really need to explain that. In the case of Dish Shifter, the reason why I like Dish Shifter is because this deck doesn't really get hit by Dish Shifter, and I definitely recommend for you to pick that up if you don't have it. Basically, the only card that get hit by Dish Shifter for this deck is Sarama. The rest of the cards, there may be one more, but it's kind of not really, because he is allowing you to summon it from the hand anyway if you want to. But the point is that this guy, basically, if you have no cards in your graveyard, you send this card from your hand to the graveyard during the turn, and then as a quick effect until the end of the next turn, it's basically turn off the graveyard and just make it into a banish zone. So basically, pendulums, everything getting banished, it's absolutely ridiculous. And this just turn off so many decks, you have no idea. So having this card that doesn't really hurt you that much, because your cards just need to be destroyed, they don't need to hit the graveyard, is actually really powerful, and I love this card to death. So this card definitely earned a spot in this deck. You can definitely change it out if you feel like it, but I think like this is just like really good tech choice to play in your deck. Definitely can change depending on the format, but I think like a lot of grave-centric decks are now around, so this becomes even more powerful, which is really ridiculous. But that does it for the monsters. Now we'll move on into the spells. And for the spells, you run a very small chunk of spells, but I still think it is really important to run them. And that is the triple copies of Abomination's Prison, triple copies of Pot of Extravagance, and then the last spell might seem a little bit of contradictual, or one that you don't really have to run, and that is 3 copies of Dark Ruler No More. Now, in the case of these spells, I explained them all individually. In the case of Abomination Prison, honestly, it's pretty simple. This is basically your Rhoda. It's allowing you to add any Unchained card from the deck to your hand, and then if this card is destroyed by a card effect, set card is destroyed by card effect, my apologies, it's actually pretty important to remember. So you set it to your side of the field, you destroy it by a card effect, you're able to summon an Unchained monster directly from your deck. So it's basically really good. If you open up with 2 of them still, you're able to activate one, search something, then set the other one, use the effect of, for example, Aruha, destroy it, and then summon what you need from the deck. The only problem with this card, however, is it doesn't count as an Unchained card, is an Abomination's Prison, which is a problem because your cards cannot set this back with things like Sarama, so this could be a little bit of a problem, but it's just a good search card. You have to run this card at 3. Now, there are also Wailing of the Unchained that you can run, but because we do run Pot of Extravagance, there's really no reason to run Wailing, because you don't really banish any cards from your deck, so there's really no reason for that, and Wailing just doesn't really do enough. In the case of Extrav, obviously it's pretty simple. You banish 6 cards out of your extra deck, you draw 2. Very, very good. You can run Prosperity if you want to. I just feel like Extrav is actually better for this deck. Surprisingly, because of the fact that this deck actually wants to have more resources in hand. It doesn't really care that much what it draws, as long as these good cards, because the deck itself has a lot of good cards. So it kind of don't really care most of the time, but sometimes you could say that Prosperity is better, so you can just play and jiggle with those around. But for those who want to run Desires, instead, don't worry, I got you covered. At the end of the video, there is the budget option for these people who don't really want to play Extra. And then for Dark Ruler, definitely the more debatable card. I want to explain this for a second, is because of the fact that your deck is really good at breaking boards. And you need to understand that sometimes you're not guaranteed to going first. Sometimes you do need additional board breaker for going second rather than just like having a dimension shifter. So this is basically kind of like a multifunctional double layer thing that basically just like kill decks double in a way. So it's kind of like just giving you the ability to just like deal with stuff. So if you don't want to run Dark Ruler, you can change that out, but I just love Dark Ruler quite a bit. And that does it for the spells. And then for the traps, we'll start with the Unchained ones. We have Escape of the Unchained, and then triple of Abominable Unchained Chamber, I believe. Or Chamber of the Unchained, I believe how you pronounce this one. Basically, these two are the cards that you mostly want to pop with your cards, because then you have Sarama, which can set these back. In the case of these two effects, Escape of the Unchained have the two effects that basically the same as Abomination Prison, same with this one, but the effect that does matter is that you get to target one Unchained monster you control, destroy it, and then you can also, and with it, you can also destroy another card on the field. It doesn't have to be your opponent cards though, so it can be yours if you need to destroy 2 cards for yourself, so do keep that in mind that you can do that. Most of the time it's just going to be 1-for-1-ish kind of card, or should I say a +1 card, because you destroy a card for your opponent, get something that you want to out of your deck, and then you still are able to go off, which is actually kind of stupid. And then Abominable Chamber of the Unchained. Well, this is a mouthful. This one is your Monster Reborn / Special Summon from the hand in trap form. It's just really, really good, and you want to run 3 of it, also because of that. And that's it for the Unchained traps. And then for the rest of the traps, this one is the Hand Trap Imperm. And then the other one that I like to run is Torrential Tribute, and then the last one I like to run is Royal Imperial Order. This one is honestly kind of like maybe look a little bit of like debatable lineup of additional traps, but hear me out. Imperial Order, definitely you don't really run a whole lot of spells. This is more of like if you do have the ability to draw into it turn 1, it just become a very, very nice off card, so it kind of doesn't really conflict with your Dark Ruler that much, so you didn't really worry about it. Torrential Tribute, honestly, I don't really need to explain. This is just extra plus for you. You don't really care. You're destroying your own monsters. Basically, you can destroy your opponent's entire board and you don't really care about it. And then in the case of Imperm, I just want to deal with something called Dragoon. Basically, untargetable monsters that your opponent can summon is basically the bane of the existence for this deck. So this is the only thing that I can think of that is still good enough that your opponent cannot really negate and can help you deal with Dragoons and such. Because a lot of, like, extra deck monsters have negation for monster effects. They don't really have a whole lot of negations for trap effects. And also that's just really good because it can also turn off pendulums. Sometimes I do set this to my side of the field, and use the effect of Arua if I have to get an extender to my hand and then pop it or whatever. Like, there are a lot of interactions why Imperm is good. So you can play this, you can play whatever else do you need. I just felt like Imperm just does so a whole lot more for the deck right now, and also double on the more annoying problem, which is called, oh yeah, Dragoon. So I just have another way to just deal with Dragoon rather than just having Ash Blossom. So that's actually pretty good. And don't worry, again, we have a budget option for that in the side thing that we're going to do later. But regardless, that does it for the main deck. Now we'll move on into the extra deck. And for the extra deck, we have double copies of Unchained Abomination, then triple copies of Unchained Soul Anguish, and triple copies of Unchained Soul Rage. Now, this lineup of Link monsters are Link monsters that you don't really want to banish all of them with Extravagance, and that's why you run 3 of each. Except from this one, because this is a little bit worse than the rest, but it's still really good. So these are the ones that you want to keep in your extra deck, at least 1 copy each. But sometimes, you know, it does happen, Parts of Extravagance will banish some of them, so there are alternative options and stuff like that. But if you're playing the extra version, you definitely want to maximize. If you do play Prosperity slash extra, or should I say, desires, you could just modify your extra deck depending on what you playing specifically. But what did these cards do? Well, both of these share the following effect, is that if they basically get destroyed, you get to add one Fiend monster from your graveyard to your hand, which is kind of a nice recovery card. But mostly what they do is that this one is kind of like the follow-up for this guy, which is basically you target an opponent monster, you basically make it to your opponent, and then you're supposed to basically leave it to your side of the field for your opponent's turn. This one could do the same thing, but during the opponent's turn only, and then this one and this one share the following effect, that you get to target, and then you get to summon a Dark Link monster with those monsters. So the point is just going like this. You kind of just go the Soul of Disaster during the opponent's turn, or during your turn, summon Rage. Rage will then kind of like, during the opponent's turn, go into Anguish, and then go back to your turn again, use Anguish and another opponent monster to summon Abomination. That's kind of how that works. But mostly, it's just really good. And then Abomination is just really amazing because it just pops multiple cards, so that's actually kind of good. But that does it for the Unchained stuff, and now for the rest of the extra deck, honestly up to personal preference. What I like to run is one copy of Zeraboros, one copy of Boros Sword, one Trisbania, one Unicorn, one Phoenix, one IP, and one Ding Dong. Basically, these are up to personal preference, what you want to, so you can do whatever you want to specifically. The reason is for Ding Dong is because you can bait an opponent Dragoon, summon an Abominable Unchained Soul from your hand, and then find a way into Disaster. And then Disaster and Abominable make this together, then you have an out for Dragoon, because Dragoon is a little bit of a problem. IP is just supposed to be your fourth kind of Rage, because sometimes you do banish all of your Rages, and you do need some kind of a Dark Link monster, Link 2, that works with Disaster sometimes. So this is serve as your fourth copy. You can also basically go also into this, but this is a fire, so it doesn't really work with Disaster, so do keep that in mind. So this is good for you if you lock yourself into Fiend. And then these two are your Link 3s for, with Rage. This one is a 4 for you to Breaking Board. Definitely, if you have an access code, play access code instead. And then Zeraboros is just absolutely ridiculous. There's really nothing to say about Zeraboros. It's a very, very underrated card in my opinion. But that's pretty much did it for the list. Honestly, a very, very fun one. Maybe I'm a little bit like, how should I say this? Kind of like went from it very, very fast. Or a little bit too slow, I don't know. Point is, this list is very, very fun. There are a lot of rooms to explore with it and still have a lot of things. There are different variations for this deck as well, with Evil Twins and such. But honestly, this deck is really, really fun, and if you have the cards, definitely pick them up and give them a chance. But that's pretty much does it for the list itself overall, and now we're actually going to move on into the budget option for all of you who basically don't have the ability to play Pot of Extravagance. So we're going to talk about, the other option, which is Desires. So, as I promised, this is basically the budget section for you guys that don't really have the money to spend on things like Pot of Extravagance, Pot of Prosperity, and things like Imperm, and you want some kind of a budget option to essentially replace these cards. Well, first things first, because you are going to play Desires instead of these cards, your extra deck is a lot more flexible, so you can play more things there. But for the actual cards itself, as I mentioned, you replace the 3 Pot of Extravagance with 3 Pot of Desires. However, the one biggest problem of Desires is that it can banish all of your Unchained Souls, which you at the very least need 1 or 2 of them. So what are we doing? Well, basically for the Imperms, we're taking them off as well, and we add 1 additional copy of a mobile Unchained Soul, 1 Unchained Soul of Disaster, and then just for good measure, because we do need sometimes the additional spell or trap, because, Desires banish stuff, I'm adding 1 copy of Unwailing of the Unchained Souls. And I feel this is a very, very good baseline. Of course, you can change this depending on what you want specifically, but this is kind of like a good baseline for you to start testing with if you don't have something like Extravagance, and then just play with these cards around and essentially play however you want to. So this is like a good budget option, and like I said, the extra deck is very, very flexible. But that does it pretty much for the video, except from, obviously, if you want to, check whatever I'm going to show for next week. Basically the same last options. I'm just going to add Dark Lord instead of Unchained, because Unchained won last week, and that's why we have this deck profile. So these are the 4 options on screen, and you can choose whatever one of them that you want me to do next for next week. And probably after that, I'm probably going to do an FA list just for preparation for Lightning Overdrive, but we'll probably see. Point is, this is pretty much your options for next time. And yeah, that's pretty much does it for the video. So if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and usual, remember, creativity is the key in this game. Have a good day, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.